WNYC is supported by Jazz at Lincoln Center, presenting a tribute to Bobby Short, hosted by Michael Feinstein, May 15th at 7 p.m. and May 16th at 7 and 9 p.m. in the Allen Room at Jazz at Lincoln Center. Tickets at jalc.org.
You're listening to WNYC On Demand, streaming audio available when you want at wnyc.org and on iTunes. He'll always be known in the rock world as the founder and leader of the longtime band King Crimson, but guitarist Robert Fripp has done many other things in the course of a long career, including his work with Brian Eno in developing what he calls Frippertronics, this mid-1970s album Evening Star, an early indication of a path that both Fripp and Eno would pursue in more experimental forms of music. This was essentially Fripp's electric guitar, fed through two analog tape decks side by side with a single reel of tape going from tape deck 1 through the heads onto tape deck 2 and producing this delay effect. Now, of course, nobody uses analog tape, everything's digital, and Frippertronics has become soundscapes. And as he has done for us on New Sounds a couple of times in the past, Robert Fripp has done a series of live soundscapes for us in our New Sounds concert series at the World Financial Center's Winter Garden. He did a 2-day residency December 3rd and 4th of 2010 in the Winter Garden atrium, a cathedral-like space in the World Financial Center downtown. And we'll be listening to some of the live performance from Saturday afternoon, December 4th. We'll also hear from Fripp himself. I'm John Schaefer. You're listening to New Sounds, and I spoke to Robert Fripp the day before the residency started, and it was a pretty wide-ranging conversation, lots of stuff that we don't have time for on the air, but you'll find as web extras on our webpage, wnyc.org/newsounds. But keeping on topic, at least for the moment, we got to some interesting things, as you'll hear later in the hour. Discussions of whether these New Sounds live performances might have been the end or maybe a new beginning in Fripp's long career. Robert Fripp, welcome back to New Sounds.
Hello, John.
Soundscapes has really evolved over the course of your career, from the early Frippertronics with analog tape to the digital realm. Where is it now? What has happened since we last saw you with these pieces?
It began in Soho in March 1978 at the Kitchen with Reel to Reel. Mm-hmm. Then it moved into...
Sadly, I remember that day.
Why sadly?
That's a long time ago, Robert.
Yes, it was. And it was cold outside, too. It was very cold outside, and the poor folks were waiting in the snow. And one character hurtled to the front of the queue for the first performance and pushed his way forward.
That was not me.
No, it was Robert Christman. Aha. Brandishing his pass of power and importance to push ahead of the poor cold people.
The veteran critic, even then, of the Village Voice, making sure he was first online.
Well, good for him. He viewed the performance favourably, although his record reviews referred to Fripp was always a jerk. This is, of course, talking around the point, but Frippertronics began at the Kitchen in Soho. The name emerged because I was asked to find a name for the performance, and the silliest immediate name that flew by was Frippertronics. So it moved into the digital domain in 1991-92, and the latest rig is designed by John Sinks, and the looping is in a couple of Eventide 8000s, which was developed for cinema surround.
Mm-hmm. Now, the point being, analog tape restricted you to loops of the same length, more or less.
Determined by how far you could stretch the Revoxes and maintain the pressure on the tape.
Mm-hmm. Now, are you able to adjust and, what has it done to the creative process to have the sort of the freedom from how far apart your tape decks are in determining in the moment how the piece is going to evolve?
Well, in the moment you always jump regardless of technology. What the technology does? Well, I have 90-second loops which will run for a week, a month, or a year without any decay. They'll never stop. The rig I have enables me to be hands-on in the moment, so I can change any of the parameters with one hand while playing with the other, whether it's the particular sound from the guitar or synth, the loop time, the processing from the Eventide 3000s. I can do that with one hand. However, occasionally it all breaks down. For no particular reason, it all breaks down. The last time it broke down in a hilarious fashion was in front of the President of Estonia, the Prime Minister of Estonia, the First Lady of Estonia, and the Estonian Ambassador to the United Kingdom in Tartu. It was a performance made for the President's birthday at midnight. And I came on and began, and it all went completely wrong, and I had to dump the lot and indicate that the main act should come on immediately. So sometimes it's like that, even with good kit.
Well, to hear you talk about these 90-second loops that could go for weeks or months without decay, it seems like this is not unique to you or to Brian Eno, but over the years, your collaborations with Eno have seemed to be a lot about time, about dealing with another way of looking at time in the creation of music.
Well, if we look at time, first of all, we have time's arrow, sequential time, determined time, cause and effect, one thing after the other. Then you have the eternal pattern, and then you have creative time, time governed by decision-making. Now, that's the interesting one.
Yeah. I actually thought when you said the arrow of time, I thought you were going to sort of pair that with the circle of time.
Well, that's eternity. That's the pattern, the recurrent pattern. That's the cycle. So some things you do one particular thing which causes the next effect, and it goes on forever.
Robert Fripp, we're discussing The Soundscapes, a series of live improvised works, part of the New Sounds Live concert series that we do each winter at the World Financial Center's Winter Garden. More of our conversation with him still to come, but here's a little bit of the music from the Soundscapes performance on December 4th, 2010. That's Robert Fripp, one man, one guitar. All of that music being created live in the moment in that space. These soundscapes are site-specific. This one was specific to the World Financial Center's Winter Garden on the afternoon of December 4th, 2010, day 2 of a 2-day residency during which Robert Fripp played 4 of these hour-long soundscapes as part of our annual New Sounds Live concert series. And in a moment, we'll have more of this performance and more of our conversation with Robert Fripp, and including a somewhat surprising pronouncement from the guitarist and composer. Stay with us for that. I'm John Schaefer, and you're listening to New Sounds.
Mulifanya nini? Wandoberwa mulifanya nini? Mkamu wa Mary Amboka, mkamu wa Mary Amboka. Sasira mebaki kulia, sasira mebaki kulia.
This is New Sounds, program number 3151, listening to some soundscapes, the electric guitar, ambient music created by guitarist Robert Fripp, live in the moment, in this case, at a New Sounds Live series of events in the World Financial Center's Winter Garden, a place that Robert likes to play and has performed in a number of times over the years. We talked a little bit about that earlier, and the topic comes up again here and leads to a somewhat surprising place. How important is the place itself, the time, the audience there? How much does that affect each soundscape?
Remarkably. The World Financial Center is something like a secular cathedral. The intention of the place is not fundamentally devotional, or to put it, maybe it is devotional, but to the concerns of man somewhat more. But well nevertheless, within that space, something is possible. And part of it is the performances there are not governed by commerce. In other words, you don't have to buy a ticket to go in. You can walk in and bring goodwill. Whereas the performances in a church or in a sacred site, devotional in intent, then a commercially mediated event, whatever the intention of the performer, is going to bang up against the expectations and demands of the audience, which is generally, I've paid my hard-earned money, therefore I have rights, like, play me what I want to hear. And increasingly it's been impossible for me to work in a world governed by commerce, where the musical event is mediated by commerce.
Do people coming to a Robert Fripp Soundscapes event expect to hear Schizoid Man or Court of the Crimson King or
Not
Larkstone?
If it's in a church, but if it's in a jazz club or a rock club, yes, maybe.
And so how do you deal with that?
I don't play them. I play in churches.
Yeah. What about the intent of the music? Music is, if not it doesn't have to be a devotional or a sacred act, but it certainly can be a spiritual one. And soundscapes in particular seems to have, over the years, kind of accrued this spiritual overtone to it. It comes out in some of the recordings, the titles.
Well, for me, music is always sacred, regardless of the context you perform it in, or the particular kind of music that you're playing. But within a church and within soundscapes, the intention is more clearly defined, more clearly linked to the space you're performing within. And may I say that really I'm no longer a working player in the sense that I have been for 43 years actually. As of December the 24th coming up, I'll be a guitarist for 53 years. As of April next year, I will have been playing in public, I think, for 52 years. In November 2004, I ceased to be a touring player, where the focus of my musical life was on the road. Mm-hmm. And although I play in public to a degree, that's increasingly less. It's entirely possible that for the next period, the World Financial Center is the completion of that phase of my musical life.
Somewhat dramatic statement from guitarist Robert Fripp. Now, I will hasten to say we recorded this interview the day before he began the 2-day residency of New Sounds Live events at the World Financial Center. After concluding the fourth and final soundscape on Saturday evening, December 4th, he said, "You know, this didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a new beginning." A new beginning for what, you may ask? Well, there actually are some clues as to a future direction that Fripp would like to go in the final portion of our interview, which we'll get to in just a while. But first, let's go back to the live soundscape from Saturday afternoon, December 4th, 2010. It's Robert Fripp, a live soundscape in the World Financial Center's Winter Garden, part of our New Sounds Live concert series. Robert Fripp, live at the World Financial Center's Winter Garden, creating one of his distinctive electric guitar soundscapes as part of a New Sounds Live residency. 4 programs over the course of 2 afternoons and 2 evenings, December 3rd and 4th of 2010. This was the second afternoon performance that we've heard on this edition of New Sounds. Still to come, some unanswered questions, some big unanswered questions left hanging in our interview with Robert Fripp, and a look ahead to the December 4th evening performance of Soundscapes. You're listening to New Sounds. As usual, a playlist is available to tell you what you're hearing and to give you information on Robert Fripp's Soundscapes and all the rest of the details you might want. You can find it on our webpage, where you will also find lots of other extras. Robert Fripp talking about being sampled in a hit song by Kanye West, rediscovering the original lost master tapes of the first King Crimson record, and much more. On the web at wnyc.org/New Sounds. This edition of New Sounds is the first of 2. We'll have another one in a couple of weeks, drawn from Robert Fripp's New Sounds Live residency in the World Financial Center's Winter Garden. And Robert Fripp, of course, electric guitarist, founder of the rock band King Crimson, the record label DGM, Discipline Global Mobile, which has produced lots of other artists' recordings. He's the founder of the League of Crafty Guitarists and the Crafty Guitar Seminars, which have taught a sort of alternative acoustic guitar technique to hundreds of players around the world, many of whom have gone on to perform and record on their own. But there is still the matter of Robert Fripp, who, when we left him about 20 minutes ago, was talking about this set of performances as ending a major phase in his career, and perhaps starting a new one. When you look at these different parts of your musical life, where does something like Soundscapes, performing Soundscapes is different from any and everything else that you've done as a musician, as the head of DGM. So is it a fundamentally different creative experience from fronting a band?
Yeah, certainly. Yes, if you have an off night, the other guys will have an on night. Mm-hmm. If you're on stage and nothing's coming, life is hard if you're on your own. But you trust the event and keep going. One of the most terrifying nights of my performance life in 43 years as a professional player was in Estonia. And nothing whatsoever was coming. It was 2007.
This is not the president's birthday?
No, it was an earlier visit, a visit 2 years earlier.
I'm guessing there won't be a third visit to Estonia then.
Estonia is wonderful. There were 5 churches in Estonia. I played them all gratis. And I wasn't aware that the profits from the event kept the promoter in business for the next year. Subsidizing, may I say, other events that wouldn't have been able to take place. But there was this awful, awful night and nothing came. So what you do is hold yourself in place and trust the event. And listening back to it, the musical event was there. Something like, because nothing seemed to come of its own, the effort had to be made to hold the space, something came through.
It just sounds like a magical way of making music. Could you walk away from this?
Yes.
How could you do that?
You just close your guitar case and walk. Very easy.
But don't you get something from this experience?
Well, certainly, yes. But it then comes down to what is your intent and where is the work. And have you ever heard of the Orchestra of Crafty Guitarists?
Well, what is happening? I thought you had suggested that the Guitar Craft
has
process
ceased to exist.
Yeah, on its 25th anniversary.
Yes, it ceased to exist, and on the same day, then the work of the Guitar Circle and the Orchestra of Crafty Guitarists got into finer gear. and 99 people. There was actually the Orchestra of Crafty Guitarists 3 was 100 people. They walked in and the instruction was given, when ready, please begin. And they began. Wonderful. It had as much juice as King Crimson in 1969 or King Crimson in 1981. But it was not an event that took place within popular culture. But you can see on YouTube excerpts of it on YouTube if you like to.
Are you there? Are you one of the guitarists?
Oh, yeah. Well, yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
so you are not stepping completely out of the...
Well, the nature of my work is very different. But I have been known to step on and take part in an encore with some of the players. But that's not guaranteed. It depends. I follow my feet where they walk. And this is the key to it. If my feet walk, I follow them. And I may not know where they're going, but my instinctive, intuitive sense is pretty good. But it's a lot quicker and a lot more reliable than my mind. So if my feet lead me in a particular direction, I tend to follow it, even if it's an area that I couldn't have anticipated, or if I could have anticipated, I didn't want to go there. I don't know if that makes sense. But
well, I suppose given your ambivalence towards the life of a touring musician, your entire career has been...
There's no ambivalence towards my life of a touring musician. It's wretched. Look, here's a quick overview of my life. My personal life, I've never been happier. My professional life is as wretched as ever. The industry is appalling. And that's what it is. And in terms of my proper work in life, rich and getting better because I get older.
Have you ever read this famous Japanese Zen koan about a young monk who achieves enlightenment, and the other monks in the monastery hear this and go rushing to his chamber to find out if it's true, and they come running in and they say, "Is it true? Have you attained enlightenment?" And he says, "Yes." And they ask him, "How do you feel?" And he says, "As miserable as ever."
Well, there we are.
Just something about your story just reminded me of that old koan. Your entire career, Robert Fripp, is a koan. And I've always meant to ask you, the name Fripp is a very odd name, and I haven't seen it any place except within your immediate family. What kind of name is that? Do you know anything about the derivation of Fripp?
Well, actually, yes, I do. My father, Arthur Henry Fripp, researched the family genealogy, including the name. And there were three possible origins of the name. One was the Welsh royal family in the 8th century, which he disregarded, I think, wisely. The second one, the most obvious one, was with the Huguenots from Frippery, lacework or a careless and extravagant trifle. Or the third one, which is the most likely, comes from Anglo-Saxon Firth and Frith and Fripp, which is woodland. So a Fripp would have been a woodlander, man of the forest, if you like.
And so Fred Frith, his last name would be a cognate of Fripp.
Yes, it would have been a derivation from the same Anglo-Saxon root, yes. And my great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, Robert Fripp, died in the Fripp family village in 1752 of Witchhampton, where I married my wife on May the 16th, 1986, where we buried our father there just a year before, and where we buried our mother in July 93. My Uncle Bill, Alfred George Fripp, is 96 and currently the oldest English service prisoner of war. He was in 12 German prisoner of war camps. He was involved in the Great Escape.
Wow.
He was moved out of Stanislav 3 6 months before the actual escape, but he was part of providing the parcels and equipage to support the escapers. My father got the first record of Fripp's in Dorset to 1590 in Edmondsham, a mile outside Cranbourne, 5 miles north of Witchhampton. However, the Gilbert family got a Fripp back to 1588 in Dorset because the Fripp girl married into the Gilbert family. I can go on and on and on.
Well, apparently your family does go on and on and on. I mean, you're into the 16th century already.
Yeah. Well, you have Fripp Island off South Carolina, which was a Captain Johannes Fripp, who was a pirate.
Huh. I didn't know that.
Yeah, he was a pirate, but because
I didn't know there was a Fripp Island.
Oh, yes, off South Carolina. Being very well developed in the past 30 or 40 years.
Well, Robert Fripp, this has been a most unusual conversation. Great to speak with you again. Thank you so much for being part, once again, of our New Sounds Live series.
It's my privilege. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Robert Fripp, my guest on New Sounds. Another one of the soundscape performances that Robert Fripp did as part of our New Sounds Live concerts in the World Financial Center's Winter Garden in early December 2010. This actually was the last of the 4 performances over 2 days. We'll hear more from this and some of the earlier performances in a future edition of New Sounds. We've heard from Fripp himself, and there is more where that came from. There are some very interesting web extras on our website, wnyc.org/newsounds. Check those out as well. In the meantime, thanks for being with us for this edition of the program. I'm John Schaefer, and this is New Sounds.